Welcome to Shadow the Stereotypes, where our intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models. So the intention of this show is to shine the light on and to showcase men of color who are doing amazing things in the world. And joining me today is Mr. Chase Murphy, who is one of those men who's doing some amazing things. And he's written a powerful book called Kick Rocks that I actually believe it's one of the most important conversations we aren't having in the Black community. So I'm really honored and privileged to have him on the show, and I'm really looking forward to jumping into this conversation with him, sharing some information that I know can inspire you to become the best you possible. So without further ado, hello, Mr. Chase, how are you today?
How are you doing, Michael? Good to see you again.
Well, before we talk about your book, I want to just kind of jump in with a few icebreaker questions. So first of all, tell us where you're from.
I'm originally actually from St. Louis. I was born and raised here until about fifth grade.
Okay.
This was home, St. Louis.
St. Louis, Missouri. Now, tell us a little bit about your family, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Oh, what can I tell you? I'm the firstborn of four. Mother and father were educators, PhD in psychology on my dad's side. My mother, master's degree in education as a teacher. So my entire life really has been around learning and education. It's interesting, and I'll just be real honest with this when we talk about family. As I covered in the book, my understanding of family isn't exactly what you would call Norman Rockwell or the Waltons, but I've got some family.
We all do. I think it was John Bradshaw who coined the term dysfunctional, and so we all have, we all have that going on. So we're kindred spirits here. So now tell us this. So tell me this: what do you do for fun?
Oh my gosh, what I do for fun, Harley Davidson, my wife and I get on that bike and we just ride.
Nice.
I compose. For me, music is meditative. It's my way of communicating with the universe. It's my way of communicating with who I believe God actually is in me. So those two things, ride my Harley and music, that's fun for me.
Nice. Now, name a woman who has inspired you to be who you are.
Wow. Name a woman who has inspired me to be my grandmother.
Okay.
My grandmother, Norlene Murphy. She was the kindest person I ever met in this life. She really was.
Nice. Now, name a male role model who you look up to.
Male role model. John Mossberg. He was an English teacher when I was going through high school. His ability to accept people for who they were was literally tangible. I mean, you could really put your hands on it. And even though I was going through some things then, his compassion and his ability to speak to you in a way that was really uplifting, I've always remembered that. So yeah, John Mossberg.
Nice. Now, name a book that helped you transform your life.
This is going to sound kind of strange, but it's actually the Bible. And I don't mean the Bible from a religious perspective, because what ended up happening is, you go through this time with religion where somebody else is explaining it to you and they're telling you this is the historical basis for the Bible. But then when you start reading it for yourself and you start asking different kinds of questions that you're not necessarily comfortable asking anybody else, you begin to understand more about yourself through understanding what it is that you're reading for yourself, if that makes sense. So yeah, I would say the Bible, not because, again, not from a sanctimonious or holier than thou perspective, but I really wanted to understand who I am in terms of context on a whole. So yeah, it was the Bible.
Yeah, I hear you, and I get that. Or actually, my belief is that it is probably the most divinely inspired document ever written. Unfortunately, because of misinterpretation, most people miss out on its true intention. That's just my 2 cents worth on that. So now there are some people who are pessimistic about the future. And then you've got others like myself who are pretty optimistic about the future. So where do you fall on that spectrum between optimism and pessimism for the future in general?
Oh man, I'm optimism 2.0. I am. You know, it's really interesting that you asked me this question. Day before yesterday, I was talking to a good friend of mine, and we were talking about racism in America. And he said, America's racist. I said, no, America's not racist. We may have some racist people, and I'm not speaking ill of the media at all, but it's what we choose to focus on. It's not that we have a world where we can't go outside and commune and be communities with diversity. It's just that we tend to seem, we seem to just want to focus on this divisiveness, and it's not necessary without having a conversation on how we can heal it. So yeah, I'm optimism 2.0. I really am. I just think that we've got some things that we need to work on, but I think as we do it together, it's a beautiful thing.
There you go. Ditto on that, my friend. Ditto on that. So now I want you to introduce Charles/Chase Murphy, the professional. So tell the audience, what do you do professionally?
I am now professionally full-time. I am a life coach. I do one-on-ones, and we are going to be working that into a group setting, because what I found, Michael, I think you might agree with this as well, is like the book, you start off with this thinking you're the only person that's going through it. Then you find out that you're not. And then you find out it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And one of the things that I found kind of frustrating, Michael, is I'm all for people making a profit. But I think when we're talking about people's need to be whole, I think sometimes we need to put people for the profit and create environments where people know that it's okay to not necessarily have to come with a whole bundle of cash to get some answers to some questions they have about how to live their life. So that's why I do one-on-ones. But I've been encouraged by some people that I worked with in the past to start doing some group. So that's what I'm working on now.
Nice. Nice. So now we want to get to the meat of this conversation, which is this amazing book that you've put together called Kick Rocks. So I want to begin, first of all, by reading your dedication, because it was inspiring to me, and I really, really resonated with what you're saying. And I'd like to read it. And it says, "You will know who you are. You will know with every fiber of your being for whom this is written. For every moment that you've questioned your purpose on this earth, for you, I have written this. For every night that you have laid awake, stifling your tears so that no one would hear you, for you, I have written this. For every moment that you've considered a life beyond this one, for you, I have written this. For every yes when you wanted to say no, for every question unanswered, for every glimpse in the mirror and not knowing who it was you saw looking back, for each and every moment that you've longed to just be loved, just loved, seen, to just really be seen, to know that being seen was good enough, that being heard was okay, that a voice of kindness, a word of genuine encouragement, a peace to call our own, a sense of belonging to something gentle and loving, seemed always just out of reach, so close and yet still beyond our grasp. I dedicate the entirety of this book to you, the seeker, the questioning few, knowing now in this moment that we are not alone. You are my brothers and sisters, every one of you, and we are silent no more." Chase Murphy Jr., spring 2016. I love that. I really, really love that. Really spoke to me, because I know that there are a lot of people out there who are in pain, and there are a lot of people out there who don't know what to do about that pain. And for those of us who are courageous enough to deal with our pain, and then come back and reach back and teach someone else how to alleviate that pain, I believe that becomes our true purpose in life. And so once again, I acknowledge you for being willing to come back and reach back to support others in moving through their pain. So in your own words, why did you write this book, and why did you give it the title, Kick Rocks?
Michael, I wrote this book because when I finally got to a place where I liked myself, which led to loving myself, it was really kind of funny. I asked myself, as we all do, you hear people have conversations and you hear people say things and little bells go off in your head because you realize that you've said things like that before too. And then I started saying, I wonder. Then I'm in college over at UMSL, and I'm taking some psychology courses, and I'm listening to Freudian theories, Jungian theories, and all these theories, and I'm thinking, okay, this is all fine and dandy, and it's all academic, it's all scientific. I just wanted somebody to talk to me straight. I wanted somebody to know that I've been through what you've been through, and that there really is life after that. So that's really what inspired the book. And Kick Rocks was actually something I heard on campus when I was getting my associate's degree. I had never actually heard the phrase before. And there were two guys having a conversation on the quad, and I heard him say, man, you can kick rocks. So I made a beeline over to him and said, what exactly does kick rocks mean? And he was saying that it's a nice way of telling somebody they can go on about their business. So in conjunction with that, kick rocks is anything and everything that opposes who you really desire to be and what you really want to have can kick rocks, literally. And I think that's one of the first steps that we have to go through to get real and to be us and to be free. So kick rocks is a dedication to every person that's at that point where they're just ready to say, kick rocks. All the bad dreams, all the negative thinking, that's what it means.
Kick Rocks. Love that title. Now,
yes,
you wrote this.
Thank you.
You said, I wrote this book because there was a time in my life when I only wanted someone to tell me the whole truth. Not a convenient, palatable, easy to digest truth, but one that was the truth. Now, after everything that you've been through, what is that truth that you were looking for?
Love.
Mm.
Love. That's it. I didn't need any more hypotheticals, Michael. No more hypotheticals. And when I go back to the Bible again, and I hope this is be appropriate, it's not about religion. It is about all of my life, you go through church and they tell you what the commandments are. They tell you, you got to do this. You're not going to be worthy if you don't do that. So you're spinning your wheels trying to find ways to please this God that you've never met. And he seems rather distant. But when I started reading it for myself, this was liberating for me, Michael. When I found the first commandment is to love God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul. I still have some questions about the whole God thing. I'm trying to hear all that. The second commandment is much like the first, that you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. So I read that, and do you realize that I had to ask myself, well, what exactly is love? Because the way I was raised, if it didn't include pain, then it wasn't love. I didn't know anything about an uplifting love. I didn't know anything about a love that was a unifying, strengthening aspect of our personality. I didn't know any of that. So I literally had to review my entire life to try to pick out, well, what exactly is love? Then I thought about my grandmother. I said, well, is that love? And you really do search for that freedom. Because I don't want to belabor the point, but can you imagine me with my jacked up history trying to be in a relationship with another person and raising children? But nobody was having that conversation. Nobody was saying, wait a minute, what time out, Sparky? Until you love you, you can't possibly love anybody else. You cannot possibly be a contributing member of any society if you don't love you. You cannot give what you don't possess. So I started working on me, and that's how this book came about. Because once I realized, and that's why when you get to the end of it, I was actually concerned, Michael, that I almost felt like I did a disservice to people, because I thought to myself, well, that end is only that thick. And I'm telling people, be you. That is literally the most frightening thing for most people in their life, is to be who they are, because they don't know. So love, that's it, Michael. It's got to love yourself.
And interestingly,
on your own terms.
Yeah, interestingly enough, unfortunately, my judgment is that religion in too many cases doesn't promote us loving ourselves. When we hear things like we're born in sin and we're born sinners, and so there's this implied message that there's something wrong with us, and we have to try to get back in good graces with this person up here somewhere. When in reality, as the master said, the kingdom of heaven is within us. And so loving ourselves is the key to everything. That's what the kingdom is. The kingdom
again, when we have these conversations outside, you and I are having a conversation. We don't necessarily have to agree, but we're having a great conversation, right? We just do happen to agree. But imagine you have a person like I was, who had been through this religious, and I'm not criticizing religion. That's not what I'm doing. I'm simply asking people to ask different questions.
Right.
And I talk to my wife about this all the time. And again, don't want to offend anybody, but when you go to college, you say, I want to be an engineer. Okay, you need to take these courses at the 1,000 level. By the time you get there, you'll have your 5,000 level courses. You've satisfied, you got your proper GPA. Here's your diploma. We've nothing else to teach you for your bachelor's degree in engineering. Now, if you want to get a master's degree, you'll have to take another course. You'll have to do these other things. When you have done all of that, you expect to graduate and have a bachelor's degree and a diploma, correct? That's the agreement. I've done the work. I expect to get my diploma. You paid for that, unless you got a scholarship. Somebody's paying for that, but that costs money. Somebody had to pay for that, right? Church is the one area, and I don't mean to offend people, but church is the only place I can think of where you literally pay for the right to be uninformed. You have a person who's standing behind a podium talking to you about a historical document, whether it's historical or not, that's beyond the point. But how can you go to an environment day in and day out, month after month, year after year, and still be no better off emotionally than you were when you started? Any other environment, we wouldn't have it. You would be outraged if you did not get your degree after the time that you spent in to get your bachelor's degree in engineering. But for some reason with religion, we're okay with not necessarily having answers because they'll come tomorrow. Well, I got tired of that crap. I wanted to feel good about me today. I wanted to be able to love somebody and be loved back and know that's exactly what's happening without having to question, well, I don't really know how I'm feeling about things, but no. And guess what? You said it best. The kingdom of God is within. And somebody once asked me, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, okay, if you believe in this God that you've been raised with, again, I'm not bashing religion, but if you believe in this God that you've been raised with, and you've been told that the kingdom of God is within, at what point do you think God is separate from his kingdom? So if he's not separate from his kingdom, that means he's not separate from you. So it's none of this near and dear, because near still denotes some degree of separation. So if there's no separation, that means as the person who you're supposed to be following said, I and the Father are one. Well, if he and the Father are one, that would mean that I and the Father are one. There is no separation. But again, that goes off on a little bit more. But it's the crux under which this book was written. After everything that I had been through, the thing that was the healing factor, the thing that made all the difference in the world, was not a theory. It was actually understanding what love is, and then allowing myself to love me, and accepting all the things that I've been through didn't make me a dirty or an evil person. It made me a person with some very inconvenient experiences. But now I realize that those weren't even inconvenient, because had I not had them, you and I would not be having this conversation. So everything lent itself to a beautiful life. So, sorry, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent, but it just...
Gotcha. I hear you. So now, I have come to know that there are only two things that will cause a person to want to change their life. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent, which simply means there's an inner feeling that we know something's just not right. We may not have the words for it, we may not fully understand it, but inside we feel something is off. What triggered you to begin your journey of healing and transformation?
To use your term, it would be divine discontent. Because after everything that I had been through, including my suicide attempt, pain wasn't enough of a motivator to get me to make the changes that were necessary to actually be happy. So it was that voice in here. I knew, didn't have a name for it. I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't articulate it. And I don't really know if I can articulate it now in a way that would make sense. But something in here, not here, but something in here. I mean, and I'm not trying to be, silly about this, but if you stop for a minute and you go outside and you look around and you feel the air on your skin and you listen to the sounds going around you, we are a part of that process. We are as much a part of that process as the desire to eat and to sleep. But there was something in here, Michael, that I wasn't satisfied with what I'd been hearing. And I had questions and I wasn't getting answers because I kept looking for those answers externally because I didn't have the confidence to believe that I could be happy on my own terms. So yeah, it was divine discontent. That was it. It wasn't the pain.
Now, of course, in the Black community, if you will, there's this negative stigma about therapy or doing this, what I'll call transformational inner work. Did you bump up against any of that when you were in this process, this whole idea of, Black people don't do this?
Yeah, we ran into that along with the fact that you don't put family business out on the street. You don't talk about family first. The definition of masculinity in the Black community. Men tough it out. We don't cry. You fight for what it is that you want. Be strong. And that all sounds good, but that is so counterproductive and so destructive when we don't understand the processes under which we're operating. So in the Black community especially, and I will speak about my own family, you figure that my father, I'm willing to bet that he thought that he was doing what he believed was necessary to get me to be the kind of man that he thought I was supposed to be as a Black man. But I simply was not geared that way. I wasn't geared that way. And no matter the spankings, the beatings, the lectures, and the talks that I had with my dad, my core being is such that therapy, counseling, those aspects I wish had been talked about way earlier. But Michael, you're right. We don't talk about it in the Black community. It is a no-no. It just simply doesn't happen. And I don't know why that is. I think maybe it has to do with the distrust of, I would say, I'm only speculating here, but I think it has to do with the distrust of processes that we don't know anything about. So there's a lot of fear in thinking that if we go to therapy, if we go to counseling, somehow that's going to negate your masculinity, which is a whole nother conversation in itself. But yeah, I did run up against that.
Yeah, and I'll even go as far as to say that, the church has always been our refuge, if you will. If we look at it collectively, obviously there was a time when the church was really all we had collectively to deal with all the trauma and, the challenges that we had as people of color. And I think there's still that lingering effect that Jesus is the answer to everything. There's also that part of us, I think, collectively, and I wrote a whole chapter about this, which was titled "That's What White People Do" mentality. And so a lot of times we reject, as a group, reject the idea of therapy as something that only white people do. And it's killing us, literally. Our unwillingness to embrace our humanness, because it's like we're denying our ethnicity when we talk about our humanity. I know I've had a lot of pushback most of my life. Number one, because I'm an optimist. But number two is because I've never been afraid to trust my own intuition. I've never been afraid to follow my own heart and do what's right for me. I don't care if it was black, white. It never matters to me. And I'm so grateful for that grace, if you will, that wisdom to be able to do that. But even now today, you know, I wrote a book a couple of years ago, Shattering Black Male Stereotypes, which is the basis of this particular show. And it was a book designed to empower men of color to recognize what I call the 10 most destructive media-generated illusions about Black men. And I went on a radio show and I was being interviewed, and I was actually being attacked by Black men because I was making them aware of some of the media stereotypes that were perpetuated by the media. So there's tons and tons of reasons maybe why we as a community don't do some of this stuff, but that's why we're having this conversation today. Because it's important for us to have these types of conversations. And
you know, again, it's, you know, and listening to you talk, and, you know, we've talked before, and if you just look at the environment that we find ourselves in general, you would like to think that people are at a point where they have experienced, like we talked about, they have experienced enough pain where they want different, where they want to see life differently, where they want to feel different about life. But I can easily imagine that you got attacked because you're challenging all of those. I'm back. Sorry about that. I had an unstable internet connection, and then it just went poof.
There you go. So you're talking about, after the conversation I had about, you know, Black, you said that I was pushing against some of the Black belief systems, I guess, why they were rejecting the conversation.
Yeah, and, you know, speaking from my own personal experience, a person has to be ready and willing to have that conversation. Because I jokingly tell my wife to this day that at 53, if I tried to go back and talk to me at 23, I wouldn't be ready to hear it.
Right.
Wouldn't be ready to hear it. Because this is an unfortunate thing, Michael, is for most people, even though they may be feeling some pain, at least it's pain that they know, and it doesn't require any faith, as it were, to walk out into the unknown. It is easier to maintain and to perpetuate the actions and behaviors, even though they give you negative consequences, than it is to say, hey, what can I do to actually be happy? Can you imagine that there are people in this world right now that are more comfortable in prison than they are? That's why recidivism is so high. They get out of prison, they don't know what to do because their life is not structured anymore. And that's a sad testament to how we have raised children in this environment, in this culture. That's my opinion. But again, yeah, I'm not surprised if they attacked you for challenging their psychological and emotional paradigms. Who are you? That's not how we handle business.
So we're talking about trauma and healing. And so you've shared very openly in Kick Rocks some of the challenges. And one of those challenges that you dealt with was attempted suicide. And there's a lot of conversations in the media right now around mental health. And I will assert that I don't think it's as much a mental health issue as it is an emotional health issue, dealing with our emotions and how we feel. So I'm wondering if you can share with us, because I've contemplated suicide, never took any action on it, but I know that for me, it was driven by a sense of hopelessness and a sense of I couldn't see my way out of the pain I was in. I couldn't see it. And so there was just, it's easier to just check out because I can't deal with this pain and hopelessness. So for you, what triggered that attempt for you?
I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I was dating a lovely person. And I talked briefly in the book about how I created this life that was contrary to the one that I'd actually lived, because I didn't want anybody to know how broken I was. And I don't know what it was about this person, but I decided to tell her what had actually happened. And her revulsion and her slamming the emotional door on me, that was, for me, the final trigger. That was it. I just said, you know, I'm unlovable. Nobody really wants me. And I wanted to stop hurting. And bear in mind, I had already contemplated it anyway when I was younger. But it just seemed that on November 2nd of '94, I just wanted to stop hurting. I wanted out. I'm not glorifying suicide. I'm not saying that it's an acceptable decision. But I also want to say that we need to stop criticizing and vilifying people who have thought of it, because they don't really want to die so much as they just want to stop hurting. They just want to feel whole. They want to feel like they matter. It's not about cowardice. It's not about selfishness in the way that people think of it. I will say it's selfishness in the sense that for once in their life, they want to feel like they matter. And nobody can take responsibility for that other than the person who's going through it. But unfortunately, we haven't created environments, I don't think, that are conducive to people really being the emotional beings that we are. And I know that people disagree with this, but we talk about intelligence, we talk about being rational and logical. There's nothing rational and logical about hurting. You can't think your way out of it. You can't. Because if that were the case, I'm very intelligent. My IQ is 164. Smart as a whip. That had nothing to do how I felt in here. And I would also like to add that we as a society and a culture, we need to stop comparing pain. People are real good about saying, well, you don't have it so bad. You don't get to quantify somebody else's pain. We don't do that. Everybody has a different pain threshold. Everybody has a different perspective. But ultimately, Michael, people want to feel loved. Back to that word again, loved. And you can't think your way through it.
Right. Yeah, and the issue with that is when we negate someone's experience, it only increases the pain.
Yep.
So in your case, where you went to a person, you shared some of your pain, she negated it all.
Slam the door.
And, absolutely. Yeah, I can't even imagine. Someone that you cared about. That's what makes it even worse. Someone that you cared about didn't understand, didn't know how to validate your experience, and therefore that rejection just compounded the pain that was already there.
Yep. And it, you know, they force you after you have done a suicide. I was in the psych ward 4B at Womack Army Hospital. I was there for about a week. They force you to go through this counseling thing. It's a group therapy thing, right? And one of the requirements is you have to talk. So here you got a bunch of guys in the military, and we're sitting in this group and we're supposed to talk. But I think when you have got people who have been contemplating suicide that way, talking is a part of it, but they don't teach, even in the military, what to do with the emotion. Nothing was solved in that group by talking, because that group wasn't safe, because it was a bunch of men who, again, had these paradigms. They have these notions in their mind that it's still not okay to cry. you're in the Army. You're not going to let that happen. You're not shot. You're not wounded. So you're not going to cry. So I'm speaking only for myself in this. That group setting was actually counterproductive because, as you said, the emotion was not validated. But we learned how to say what they wanted to hear so we can get out of that building. Because if you didn't tell them what they wanted to hear, they were going to do another one of those little white cups. You're going to take some more of those pills, and you're going to shuffle down the hall, tell them what they wanted to hear so you can get out of that room. And I will say it again. When I got out of that psych ward, the first thing I did was have a cigarette and go get drunk. Now, this is a person who had just tried to commit suicide. You would think an intelligent person would go seek some help, would go seek some guidance. No, I sought my guidance right back in the bottle and right back with a pack of cigarettes and tried to act like it had never happened.
Denial.
That's our culture.
Denial is a powerful thing.
It is.
Powerful, powerful thing. So another thing that, once again, we seldom talk about, especially as men of color, is sexual abuse and trauma. And you and I share some similar stories about those experiences where our innocence was basically taken away at a very young age. And a lot of people shut out and deny the impact that that type of trauma has on them. I know, how many times have you seen someone say, you know, when I was a kid, I used to beat my behind and look how I turned out okay. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
But
yeah.
One of the things that we really need to talk about is this whole idea of trauma and the impact that it has on our lives. For example, when I was 11, I had a female cousin who raped me. Now, at 11 years old, I didn't, shall I say, interpret it as rape. I felt, well, she's my cousin, she's female, I'm a guy, I'm supposed to do this. Didn't realize that it actually had an impact on my life very deeply. It triggered in me a confusion, an insecurity, and the way that I unconsciously compensated for that trauma was because I became a very good lover. I became a very good lover in an attempt to feel good about myself as a result of that situation from 11 years old. And once again, as men, you know, we think that, you know, well, he's a guy, sex is good. No, when you're 11 years old and you have someone that's older than you that takes advantage of you, that's trauma. That's traumatic. That has an impact on your psyche, whether you will admit it or not. So for me, again, as part of my healing process, there was a time when I was so filled with shame about that, I couldn't even verbalize it to someone. I couldn't even say the word rape. I just walled that off. And so that process of healing, which we're going to talk just a little bit about next, but that process of healing and recovering from those types of experience has nothing to do with race or ethnicity. But it happens all the time in our community. We just don't talk about it. And so, again, I appreciate your courage in being willing to put this in the form of a book so that we can talk about it. So talk just a little, you don't have to go into detail, but obviously there was some trauma in your life that you talk about in the book. And let's talk just a little bit about some of the things that happened, however you feel comfortable sharing.
Well, you consider that I had the violence and the abuse going on with the parents. So here you are in 7th grade with a neighbor who is showing you kindness where you weren't feeling kindness in your own home. So that's a dangerous setup because they get you emotionally first. And, you know, you're 12, 13 years old, 11 years old, you are innately kind of trusting, even though you don't have any way to quantify how you're feeling. You just want to make sure that the feeling of being accepted doesn't go away. So he said and did all the things that I needed to hear and to feel. So when the physical aspect came around, you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. Well, you certainly can't tell your parents because you know how that's going to end up. Whether it was true or not, that's what you're thinking. And when a person tells you that if you tell anyone, these bad things are going to happen to you, but these bad things are going to happen to me, and you don't want to hurt me, do you? Oh, no. So you have all of these traps coming. And without getting into detail, without getting into anything other than that experience, and I will say this before I go any further. It is amazing to me how trying to please someone while you're being violated, that jacks up your thinking process, I think, more than anything else in this life. And I am not, again, comparing evil, as it were, or experiences, but my self-confidence, my self-worth, self-awareness was shattered, and I didn't know it. So you become isolated. You don't do well with trusting. So your relationships are always going to be a little off. And I've always wondered, lovely person that I tried to date. She was white, I was black. Her parents didn't like black people. You start thinking, and this is the other side of that we don't talk about. The tapes that are playing in your mind about you being broken and what you have experienced, they're always playing. And you wonder if other people can see it on you. You wonder if people can feel it. Do you radiate the fact that you're broken? So you try to be a good lover. For me, I tried to bury myself in books. I tried to bury myself in intellectual pursuits, debate. Because so long as my mind was active, I could kind of quiet that voice that was telling me that I was broken and I was unworthy. But if we don't start having these conversations, and this is my own personal opinion, with the amount of abuse that takes place, and I'll speak specifically with the Black community, if we don't start talking openly and honestly about these experiences, it is no wonder that it appears that the Black community is so fractured and so violent. I took mine and I internalized it. So that's where my suicide attempt came from on November 2nd, 1994. But I look around and I say, is it a way of people not being able to accept and articulate what happened to them? Another reason I wrote the book.
Yeah, and so I'm absolutely convinced that unresolved emotional trauma drives most of our depression, diseases, addictions, all of that. And until we get into a place where we start healing that, nothing really changes. We can't transform our communities until we transform ourselves. And I know that when I look at, young men of color who are, acting out violently, the media generated perception is just that they're just savages and thugs. But in reality, they're just a lot of young men in pain, and they don't know how to deal with that pain. And they're trying to find ways to cope with that pain, that trauma that they're experiencing. So until we remove that, once again, we're not going to really change a lot of the violence that we see on a regular basis. So go ahead. You got a thought you want to put out there?
No, I was just going to say this. When we talk about abuse, we need to have a conversation about defining what abuse is. Again, we have, especially in the Black community, we have this idea that spankings and whoopings and beatings are a way to train and to teach a child. And it's not. We were in Walmart the other day, and this lady, the things that are said to our children, bring your so-and-so self over here, for I'm yanking out in your little so-and-so. What are we teaching children if we resort to that kind of language, that kind of emotional abuse, and then resort to physical abuse? We have taught a child that to get your way, you can and should resort to violence. You can and should denigrate, humiliate, and demean another person to make them feel smaller so that you can feel better. That's what we're teaching, and it becomes generational. And then we're all confused when they take out guns and start shooting at each other. They have not been taught how to verbalize a need for someone to say, you are okay. What you have experienced was not okay, but that doesn't define you. We're not having that conversation. That's why I appreciate the fact that you, as a man of color, are doing what you're doing. There can't be enough of us that say, hey, time out. Got to have some conversation.
Yeah. So we have to understand that words can hit harder than a fist. And as someone who experienced every conceivable type of abuse, and yet now having moved through to the other side, made it my life's work to help alleviate pain. That's really what I'm trying to do is help alleviate pain, help people wake up to the reality of who we really are. And who we really are these loving, amazing creations. If you set the ethnicity aside, race aside, we're all human beings dealing with some unique challenges. But I believe in divine providence. I believe everything happens for a reason. And as I reflect back over my life and I think about all of the trauma and pain that I've gone through to now be where I am today, I can literally see the divine hand in all of it. And I can see how even the most painful experiences of my life actually taught me something about myself that has shaped me into the man that I am today. So I want to now move into, Chase, the joy on the other side. Because again, we have to have the conversation about healing the traumas and removing the abuse from our families. But we also got to talk about the joy that's available. The joy that's on the other side of healing. And so I know from my own experience, and I've been doing this work for more than 25 years, and I'm still growing. I'm not there, wherever there is. But what I can say with absolute certainty is that I love me. I love me, all parts of me. And that's not arrogance or narcissism. That's truth. I've moved through all the adversity, all the pain, all the trauma to now be happy, healthy, and whole. And so for you, I'm sure that number one, this book was a cathartic process that allowed you to get deeper and closer to your authentic self. So if you would, just kind of talk about the joy on the other side that I know you're experiencing.
You know, without sounding trite and being 100% honest, we say joy, and I can honestly say, I don't even really know how to describe it. What I can say is that weight that I used to carry around with me all the time internally, that lethargy, that emptiness that you can't really put your finger on, but you just know it's there. You wake up one day and it's gone. I have been married several times, and I had learned how to go through the motions and try to express what I thought was supposed to be love. But then when you find out that you like and you love yourself, it literally changes your perspective on everything. It's not about being perfect. I'm not saying that I'm perfect. Like you said, this is an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing opening and awakening even more and more and more. But laughter, I'm not nearly as moody as I used to be. I'm not as touchy about the things that people say. They don't have the same impact that they once had. Here's joy for you. Here's joy. I can now walk down the street, and this may sound silly. I can now walk down the street, and if a group of people now drive by and say, "Hey, N-word," I don't look around to see if they're talking about me. And I think you know what that feeling is like when you can go through life and you don't identify anymore with the negative, when you can go through life and you can see the positive where once you didn't see the positive. And it's being able to relate to people in a way that I didn't even know was possible. You get to see people in a whole new way. It alleviates the need to try to change people. It alleviates the need to try to figure out what they should be doing for themselves. And you get to listen to people in a whole other way. And something I didn't know was going to happen, and I hope that this will make sense. I really think people pick up on that when they realize that you're not judging them, that you're just having an honest conversation. I think there is a certain degree of connection that happens only when you get to the point where you love yourself. And you're right, it's not narcissism, it's not arrogance, it's not self-centeredness. It is simply stating a fact. I love me, and I would like for everybody to be at that point. And I'm not talking about walking around with peace signs and all that jazz. I'm talking about a very subtle understanding that when I get up in the morning, I'm worth getting up in the morning.
Yeah, and so the point that I want to make to the viewers is that there is, on the other side of that pain, and I think in the good book it says, the peace that transcends understanding. In other words, you can't put words on this feeling, because that's what it is. It's a feeling of connectedness. It is a feeling of wholeness, of oneness, that, I mean, if I could bottle it up and just pass it around, it would heal the world.
And for free.
And it comes back to what you were saying at the beginning, Chase, which is it's love in its purest form. And it's even more than a feeling. It's difficult to try to describe and put into words, but my close friends gave me a nickname, and they call me Michael Happy Ass Taylor. And they've, I've got a small group of friends who I'm really close with, and they know me better than anyone. And when we first got together, they thought that this was a guy that was in complete denial, that there's no way that a person could be that happy and optimistic all the time, especially as a Black guy. It's like, surely this guy's in denial. But they have come to know that this is just me. This is the lens through which I see the world. And it is as a result of all of the work that I've done in learning to love myself. Yep. And it is in getting to that place where I literally have connected to my own soul. And it is that which guides me to do what I do. And so I want everyone to know that we're talking about abuse and trauma, which is real, but you got to know that there's something to look forward to. And that something to look forward to is this peace, this inner peace that transcends anything you can think about in your head. It's a feeling, it's an experience, and it's available to you if you're willing to do your work and go on your own journey. You got something you want to say?
Yeah, and I'll say that in the book. And there's something, I was trying to explain this, and I think my wife would agree. Sometimes we think that when we get healthy and we get whole, life will be very boring. That the things that we enjoy doing in the depths of our despair, as it were, there are a few things that we thought we enjoyed. And I want to use this as an example. It is a liberating thing for me. I like to taste the beer. But there was a time, I like tasting beer. But there was a time when alcohol was a mechanism to try to silence how I felt about myself. So there wasn't enough alcohol for me to drink to stop hearing that voice and to stop feeling the way that I felt. It is now quite enjoyable to have a beer for the sake of enjoying the taste of beer and not trying to quiet anything, and then be able to go about your business. So it seems like, if people listen to that, they say, well, you're still drinking beer. Now, you got the intent and the context is completely different. It isn't necessary to go out and spend your paycheck to try to feel better about yourself. It isn't necessary to try to impress anyone with what you can and can't drink to be accepted. Don't need to do that anymore. That is a part of that inexplicable peace that you have, and saying, I can still enjoy certain things. I don't need to overeat the way I used to overeat. I don't need to go to the gym to be bigger and so I can impress the people with how I look. That need simply isn't there. And what's so subtle about it, Michael, I think is it just kind of sneaks up on you.
Yeah.
It's just some of those things, some of those old behaviors, they just go away, and then you say, hey, yeah, I think I do feel pretty good today. And then you're feeling pretty good Monday, Tuesday, then it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then it's a week, then it's a month, and the next thing you know, you've been married almost 5 years, and you've been happy. It's like the first day you say, oh, y'all still in the honeymoon stage. Well, I'm going to stay in the honeymoon stage because it feels good. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been there for 17 years, my man.
That's the kind of stuff. Yeah, so you know what I'm talking. It's. I never thought that I was going to feel this way about another person, let alone feeling this way about myself. That's a freedom that I could never have imagined. That's why we're having these conversations. That's why I wrote the book. Because if we can get people to start thinking that it might be possible for them, then they start asking some questions. What would it be like to be able to go through life and not feel this way? What would it be like if we can just get people to start asking those questions and imagining the possibilities? They have no idea how powerful that is. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he.
Absolutely. And that's why we do what we do. Because let me speak for myself. That's why I do what I do, because I want everyone to experience the joy, the connection, the inner peace that I feel on a daily basis. And I coined this quote, and it says, when we learn to quiet the noise of our mind and move into the silence of our hearts, then we will hear the voice of our souls. Yep. So for me, I agree. Listening to the voice of my soul now versus that chattering ego mind that said I was worthless and, not worthy of love and all of that. And when I learned to quiet all that down and move down to my heart and then got to my soul, then I connect to the universe. I connect to the source of all things. And that's, for me, where the joy comes from. It is that connection to that which is greater than myself, which does not need a label. It is it. It just is. And so with that being said, Mr. Murphy, I want to give you an opportunity now to let people know, how can they find you? How can they learn more about the book? Maybe purchase your book, give them the 411. And I'll also post a link below this video on the site so that people can access it. But for now, just share with people how they can find you and your book.
Well, there's two ways you can do it. You can go to Amazon.com and you can type in the search bar, Kick Rocks, the book, Chase Murphy, and that should pull it up. Or you can go to ChaseMurphyJr.com, and up in the bar, whatever the links, I've got a link for the book, and it will take you there. You can either get the paperback or you can get the ebook. But yeah, you can go to my website, which is ChaseMurphyJr.com, and it's there. It's available.
Fantastic. Now, I want you to leave the audience with some words of wisdom, whatever you feel moved to share.
You can change your entire world today. You may not see it, you may not feel it right away, but you can begin the process of living the life that you really want to live right now. And it all starts with a decision. And if we can let go of the fear, then that decision can be made. And cut yourself some slack. You don't have to be perfect. cut yourself some slack. It's just a learning process. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. And here's the one thing that I wish somebody had told me. You're not in this by yourself. You're not alone. You are not alone. There are phone numbers that you can call. There are people that are available if you're willing to just think that it's possible for you to be happy. So that's what I want to leave people with. You're not alone. You're not alone.
Well, I'm reminded of the saying that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So I'm suggesting that you take a step today, move in the direction to find out, to wake up to discover, however you want to say it, who you really are. And I want to highly recommend that you pick up a copy of Kick Rocks. I give it my deepest heartfelt recommendation. It's powerful. It's something that, again, it's needed in our community, but most importantly, it's for you. It's for you. If you're watching this video, I don't believe in accidents. There's no accidents in a perfect universe. There's a reason you're watching us right now. There's a reason you've paid attention to this conversation for this long. So just listen to that nudging in your soul. Pick up a copy. Know that it's a guidebook along your journey of life. And I know that it can guide you to a rewarding and fulfilling one. Well, Mr. Chase, I just want to say thank you, my man, for spending an hour with us, sharing some insights and wisdom.
Oh my gosh.
I wish you the very best in all of your endeavors. Once again, thanks for your courage in putting together this powerful document, Kick Rocks. And I will be posting it on Facebook and some other sites. And again, we'll have links associated with this video so people can find you. So once again, thank you, my brother, for being the man that you are. I love you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Love you too. Thank you.
So this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes, where we empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. We'll see you next episode. Take care.